In the Manor, Barbara Hershey plays a woman named Judith who suffers a stroke and moves into a historic nursing home where she becomes convinced a supernatural force is killing the residents. The film is one of four Welcome to Blumhouse films and is currently available to stream on Amazon Prime Video. For this conversation, I was able to speak with the film's writer and director Axelle Carolyn, so let's get right into that conversation. I'd love to start with a fun one just because I don't know when it would come up organically in the conversation. So
Please.
I'd love to start with the wardrobe because I noticed at one point Barbara was wearing a Cthulhu shirt.
She's wearing an octopus shirt, but I do like, yes, I don't hate the Lovecraft reference.
Okay, so and then I thought she had a horror shirt at another point. So what inspired some of that wardrobe? Those cool choices.
Well, I mean, I'm a horror nerd, so it's very much part of my life. And it's the lazy thing, it's the Stephen King writing writers all the time. It's easy for me to write characters who are into horror. But also one of the things that were very crucial to writing this was nailing that relationship between the grandson and the grandma. And when I was thinking of things they could have in common, I thought one thing I bonded with my grandma over was the fact that I wasn't allowed to watch anything at home, but then she would tape things and then I would come back, I would come visit her, and my mom would leave and she'd be like giving me this pile of VHS tapes and being like, I got this for you and I thought you might like it. And like she would never watch a Bruce Lee movie, but she would tape them for me. And like little things like that that just kind of felt like, oh, this is a nice way to bond with my grandma who has no interest in horror movies, but will sit through really stupid shit just because she thinks that I might enjoy it. So I thought that can be a nice thing to build. And the grandson's into horror, she's into horror. She's wearing kind of a more mature, more elegant version of what he's wearing, but he's got like a Dark Delicacies t-shirt, which is a horror store here in Burbank. And like then she has the octopus shirt, and it was just nice parallels. It was fun to play with.
Okay, that's awesome, and I love hearing you talk about your own grandma like that because one of the aspects of this film I thought was interesting because you don't see a great relationship between a grandma and a grandson like this often. So I thought that was a cool aspect of your film.
Thanks. Well, that's because we usually write older women as being those little kind of like, would you like a scone, my dear? You know? And it was just suddenly, oh, here's my little finger, always up. I've been baking. You know, like that's never going to be me. I don't think it's the reality of what somebody over 70 or over 80 actually is. And I'm sick of seeing the same cliche. And I'm sure those people exist, and I'm sure they're absolutely lovely and they bake the greatest shit. But I wanted to show something else, and I wanted to show someone who was someone who'd hang out with, you'd hang out with without thinking of their age, and just kind of they're just a great person to hang out with.
And I'd also love to learn how you like a retirement home and a horror film seems to go together very well. So where'd you come up with the
Bizarrely so,
idea for
right?
this? Yeah, exactly.
I had to go to nursing homes to visit family, and I think that when you walk into that environment, one way or another, it's going to make you think, and it's not going to make you think of things that are very fun, and you kind of reflect on where you're going to end up, where your family is going to, and there's so many of those tough questions, and then it's little things while I was there that just kind of because everything to me feels easier to deal with if I think of supernatural stories. But the moment I see I need to do a code to get out of the house so that the people who actually live here can't leave the house, like this is scary. What if you need to leave the house? What if there's something going, like what if you're scared? What if whatever happens? And then there's a tendency to not believe people also that comes with being in a nursing home or just being older. And I'm saying this with the greatest respect for people who work in nursing homes. Those jobs are incredibly hard, but even with the best of intentions, we just sometimes don't know how to communicate with people whose abilities are declining. And so that seemed like a perfect breeding ground for horror, I guess.
Okay. Awesome. And what was it like getting Barbara Hershey and Bruce Davison for this film?
It was great. It was pretty awesome. And you can't imagine two actors who work more differently than Barbara and Bruce. Somehow they got on really well. They'd actually already worked together like 40 years ago. They were in
Oh, really?
they were like in some love story 40 years ago, and they hadn't seen each other since. So it was very interesting to see them reconnect. But they have different methods on set, but I got a cast of people who are hugely experienced in horror, so that was just a dream. Fran Bennett, she was in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Jill Larson was in The Taking of Deborah Logan, which I adore, and yeah, it was pretty cool.
What was it like shooting in the Manor itself?
I loved that place. I loved that place. We shot 3 weeks in there, and when we left, I almost cried because I'm like, I want to live here. I just loved it. It's this gorgeous mansion in Los Angeles, like right in the middle of traffic, which you would never believe I'm hoping when you look at the film, like that a house like that exists in the middle of noise and pollution and everything in LA. But it's just beautiful. The facade has been used in other horror movies, like it's the opening shot of House 2, for example. But the inside I've never seen in a horror movie, or I don't think I've seen it on screen at all. And it's this gorgeous place that's just full of like wood and carvings and this beautiful staircase and those like stained glass windows. And it just feels, I'm a huge fan of Gothic horror, so this is completely my shit. And I loved every part of it. I wish I could have to me, this should have been a real estate show, like shooting every little part of this house.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love the settings of it, and it just looks so neat for the story.
Nice.
Now, I'd also love to ask, what was it like for you as a director, kind of like playing with the imagination and playing with shadows in the horror of the film?
What do you mean exactly? Like just kind of the scarier moments, or?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to ask you without spoiling.
I think the monster is not really a spoiler because it happens early enough. And
Okay.
yeah, I think it's very fun to, I think that's one of my favorite things to do, again, as a horror fan, like those days where we have a monster on set, or on some other shows there's not a lot of blood in this, but on some other shows, like if there's blood or something like that, it just makes me giggle so much. It's the most fun. But in this case, it's interesting to play with prosthetics, and because you have to light things a certain way. You have to keep things hidden a little bit, but you also want to give just enough of a taste that people have an idea of what it is, but can't completely fully see it. So that was something that I was trying to learn when I was filming those scenes.
Okay. Any big challenges doing that? Like just a learning curve, I guess?
I mean, everything's a challenge. But yeah, yeah, I've learned a lot about how to prep a film, specifically, like trying to be more thorough in my preparation for movies, and for like learning. I've learned a lot of that also afterwards in the TV shows that I've done since. And I sometimes wish that I could go back to the Manor and make it less of a chaotic kind of, because I've learned since as well.
It didn't seem too chaotic to me. Like
no, as I was saying, I was like, maybe it felt chaotic, but I don't think that shoot was chaotic at all. I think we did pretty well. I had a great DP. I had a fantastic first AD, so he would probably slap my wrist for even suggesting that, but I think that it always feels, when you're directing, you feel like you're in the eye of a storm. There's so much going on around you, and you have to keep grounded, and you have to kind of keep an overview of everything, and not lose sight of sometimes little details get chipped away, and you need to make sure you don't lose the greater picture. And I think that's one of the things that are the toughest to see, is to kind of like, at what point am I sacrificing too much? At what point am I, what can I sacrifice that will help me get something else that's more important? It's kind of it's the art of prioritizing in some ways.
Just wanted to thank you very much for chatting with me on the Film Crazy Show about your film, The Manor.
Thank you.
So great meeting you.
Great to meet you too.